Assalamu alaikum. I'm Satyasmani, and this is Fulbright Women Podcast Season 2. We're excited to bring to you 20 brilliant women who are pushing the boundaries in their lives and fields and serving as inspirations to so many around them. Today, we're speaking with Faryal Qasim. Faryal holds a master's degree in industrial engineering from NC State University. She's an electrical and industrial engineer currently working in supply chain, specifically procurement function. She has experience on working with PepsiCo International, British American Tobacco, Nestle, and now Amazon. Faryal comes from a Pashtun family in Balochistan and is passionate about career growth and representation of women in her field. Good to see you after such a long time.
I know, likewise. How have you been?
Good. How have you been?
All good.
So, Faryal, help me understand. Electrical and industrial engineering, right? I don't hear personally a lot of women around me going into this field. What made you choose the field?
So it's a long story. I come from Quetta, right? So coming from small town, I always thought that the only career option for me as a woman was becoming a doctor. So all my life, I wanted to be a doctor. And then lucky for me, I moved to Islamabad for my A-levels. And that's when my mind suddenly opened to this world of possibilities when I had classmates who wanted to be interior designers, people wanted to study economics and business studies and whatnot. And then I realized there's a whole world out there for me to explore and discover. And somehow, going through that process, I ended up choosing electrical engineering as a field for myself. At that point in time, I thought I wanted to become a scientist and I wanted to do a PhD in digital signal processing. It really excited me at that point in time, and that's how I ended up choosing electrical engineering.
Yes, I do know that a lot of families and a lot of kids are just, pushed to become doctors. We even hear engineers, right? But not for girls, mostly in our part of the world. But someone who wanted to be a doctor then got exposure and decided she wants to be a scientist. Yeah. What is this exposure like? So I guess I want you to talk about from your personal lens, but kind of apply it, on a macro level as well. What does exposure do to girls who come from small towns or even who live in big towns but really don't have that kind of exposure, right?
I think what it basically does is it opens up your mind, because when you're coming from a small town, you have only seen so much, and you can, for your world is pretty black and white, and you know that as a girl, these are the opportunities for me, this is what I can become, these are the choices I have to make. You don't know that there's not just this black and white, there's a lot more that can be done. There's a lot of other things out there that you can explore. And it's not just about being a woman. There are so many things that traditionally, if women are not doing, maybe in your hometown, doesn't mean that women cannot do those things. So there are a lot of things that you can actually learn to challenge when you come out of that bubble and when you get that kind of exposure. I think that's what exposure does to you. It makes you challenge things, it makes you question things.
Exposure makes you learn new things as well, right?
Yeah.
But as we are learning, that is one thing. We are not a very individualistic society that way, right? There is a community, there's families around us. So is individual learning is enough in our growth, or we have to, somehow bring the family with us, their education, their learning? Talk about that when it comes to you.
Yeah, so I think personally, what I've learned through my experience is that in some way or the other, when you come from a small town, your entire family has had that limited experience and exposure that you had when you were growing up or when you were little, right? So in some way or the other, in some capacity, your family, your loved ones are also getting that exposure that you're getting through you. So I feel it's kind of your responsibility to make sure that whatever, because when you're learning, you're becoming a different person every day. So it's very important for you to take your family along with you on that journey, because then they'll be there to support you as well. Otherwise, there'll be this huge maybe for the lack of a better word, generation gap, because of the experiences and the learnings that you got, which they didn't. There might be a very big difference in the way you guys think. And, then the bridging that gap could be a very big challenge. So for me, it's always been very easy. I've always taken my family along with me. They're also very open-minded, which is lucky for me. So they've, through the experiences that I have gained, my family has learned and they have grown with me. So I think that's a very good thing that I would want to share. Yeah.
No, of course. And it's been an amazing journey so far. And of course, there's so many more milestones for you to achieve and so much more to come in your life. But so far, congratulations on everything that you've achieved.
Thank you.
But I also would like you to talk about when we as women, oftentimes, well, sometimes when we are the first ones in our community or in our families who are going forward and doing things that are different, right? And new and exciting, there are kids, both girls and boys, who are looking up to us, right? And I imagine such might have been the case in your case as well.
Yeah.
Talk about that a bit.
So there are two ways of looking at it. Firstly, I feel when you are in a way paving this, walking down this new road in your family or where you're coming from, you're also setting an example, whether you like it or not, whether you want to say it out loud or not, but you are in a way setting an example which others may like or may not like. Now, it depends on how they will perceive you or how you're going to represent yourself or present yourself in front of them later on after getting the kind of education or experiences or whatever. It really depends on all of that. I have personally seen one of my uncles becoming very against higher studies, especially girls going abroad for studies, just because he had an example of a girl who went abroad and turned out a certain way which he didn't approve of. So, looking at those examples, I always felt this sense of responsibility on my shoulders. I didn't want to be that example that people want to use and say, इसलिए हम बच्चों को नहीं पढ़ाना चाहते या इसलिए हम लड़कियों को नहीं पढ़ाना चाहते. So I've always been aware of that, and I've always taken that responsibility, and I've always tried to be responsible about it. It means that I have had to compromise on a lot of little things, little joys of my life. I'm very private in terms of my personal life, social media, etc. But I mean, these are very small compromises to make at the end of the day.
Yeah, this is an important thing that you're actually talking about. It's great that, we as women go out and set, all these new standards and new visions and kind of expose our people who are looking up to us, to this new possibility in life, right? Growth. But then it comes with a price sometimes in our cultures, right? The nuance of it is such, which is unfortunate, because why should we carry the burden of responsibility of everyone on our shoulders? I guess at the end of the day, your dream was to do something for yourself, right? And others will get inspired and choose to take that path or not and make their own journeys. We don't often see that a lot when it comes to men. In women, we see among women that our culture places a lot of that kind of, responsible burden. I would call it a burden. And you did mention that, because of that, you choose to be a little more private, so that there's no nitpicking in our choices and our lifestyle, right? How else has that burden affected you?
It has affected me in many different ways. I have always I have to be very careful when it comes to when I'm dealing with, for example, the elders of the family. A lot of times, when I voice my opinion, I have to voice it in a certain way so it doesn't offend, because there are a lot of cultural aspects that you have to keep in mind. So I don't want to be that person who, just because she got educated in exposure, got this exposure and has these opinions, now has started disrespecting the elders or doesn't listen to a certain viewpoint anymore. So I have to be respectful of all of that. I have to choose my battles wisely. I need to understand, at the end of the day, everyone is a product of the society, of this society, right? So everyone thinks a certain way because of the way they were brought up. So I have to be more open-minded like that. And I have to choose where my discussions or my opinions can make a difference, where should I get involved in those arguments and where I shouldn't, because if I do that, it will hurt this image that I'm trying to present, which might create problems for the younger, kids in our family. So I have to be mindful of all of those things. Sometimes it gets exhausting because you have to think a lot, and I have to think a lot in terms of, even in terms of my public image, wherever I go, when I'm at jobs, etc. Wherever there is like pictures being posted on public platforms. For example, this interview, I know it's going to go on a public platform. So things like that these I have to be very careful about. I have to think these things through. Sometimes I may be overthinking, but these are the things that, of course, are a burden. This overthinking and all of this is a burden. But I will mention here that I do, despite having all of these burdens, there are some little wins that I do see and which keep me going in this way. Is that your entire community, when you see them growing, when you see their thought process changing, those are the little things where I consider myself a winner. For example, when I was applying for my master's, for my Fulbright scholarship, I remember somebody in my family telling me, you will go over my dead body. Like, we won't allow women to go abroad for study. Versus a few years down the line, when they told me they were letting their daughter go abroad for a master's degree. So, going from that place to this place and having made even the smallest contribution in that change of thought process, I consider myself a winner. So these are the little things that keep me going.
It's all worth it then, right? It's all worth it. Yeah. Let's come back to your professional experience. And I kind of want to begin with when you set out after you got your degree and you got your first job, let's just say, did you realize there are differences between what, we're taught in academia and when we come to the professional world?
Yeah, so academia and industry are always very different. Like in most professions, I mean, there's a lot of difference between academia and industry, if not all the professions. Same is the case with supply chain as well. But specifically in supply chain, you have a lot more opportunities to apply what you've learned, primarily because supply chain in nature generally is very applied. Despite that, there are two ends of a spectrum when it comes to supply chain. On one end, there are degrees or qualifications like MBA in supply chain, which are very business-oriented, very, very applied in nature. When you get degrees like those, it's very easy to apply that in the industry. On the other extreme of the spectrum, we have degrees like industrial engineering, which I've done, with concentrations in supply chain. They're very, very technical, very, very in-depth. A lot of statistics and math oriented. Again, there is a nature, applied nature to this side of the spectrum as well. But it's the opportunities to apply this kind of knowledge is very limited. I think in my personal experience, I've been working in global companies in Pakistan. So in Pakistan is end market at the end of the day, right? So end markets do not necessarily have those kind of opportunities to apply that kind of knowledge.
What is end market?
End market is like so if it's a global company in different countries, operating out of different countries, so each country is one market, one end market for that company. So the policies, the strategies are decided on the global level, so in global headquarters, and then they're cascaded down to the markets, and markets have to meet those goals, etc. So the kind of knowledge that I gained in my master's program, for example, I could have applied it, for instance, in a role in global headquarter or in a research in our global R&D department, for example. But since I didn't get that opportunity, I'd never got to apply that kind of knowledge. So there is a difference.
Did you setting out when you were picking this degree, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you have this understanding of the application and the challenges you will have to, face when you'll be picking your, say, job after graduating?
Not necessarily. So just like I mentioned earlier, to start off, I chose electrical engineering, thinking something completely different in my head. But when I graduated, I decided I wanted to have some experience in the market and get some more knowledge about things, how things go, and then I can decide if I want to pursue my further studies. So my first job and my first rotation in that job ended up being in supply chain. And that's when I fell in love with supply chain. And primarily because my boss, who was the supply planning manager at that time, she went on maternity leave and I ended up doing her role. It was a very, very good opportunity for me. And I learned hands on what it means to be in supply chain. And I absolutely fell in love with it. So because of that, I went into the industrial engineering field and I chose supply chain as my concentration. But of course, I was not aware of the difference between academia and industry and the extent of the difference. Yeah.
Seems like a steep learning curve here.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in understanding how did you navigate through that?
In terms of my career,
in terms of your career, when you, like you said, when you got into supply chain and you started loving it, and then your boss had to leave because when we graduate and we get into our, say, first job, we're often looking up to our mentors or our managers or our seniors, to help guide us through, right? But in such a situation, if the boss has to go on and leave for whatever reason, and we find ourselves in this opportunity where we have to prove ourselves, we learn a lot. It's a great opportunity, but we also need to navigate on daily basis. How did you do that?
I think it's a very high stress job, right, in supply chain. And every day is a new day, which comes with a new set of challenges. So for me, the way I look at it and the way I explain my first ever experience in supply chain is I was somebody who didn't know how to swim and was thrown into a swimming pool and had no option left but to learn how to swim. And that kind of learning then stays with you forever. So that is the kind of learning I got when I took up the responsibility of supply planning manager. Firstly, it was a very senior role. And for me to be getting that opportunity was a big opportunity in itself. And then the very first day I sat on my boss's desk, and the kind of calls I was receiving, they were protests. We were not able to get raw material to the factory, and how I was going to help manage that over the weekend. That it was just very exciting. It was because you can see the difference each and every step, every decision that you make. You can see the difference it makes on a bigger level, on the level of the organization, the kind of production volumes, etc., profits and losses. You can see every impact of every decision that you make, and it's a very big impact. So I think that's what just kept me interested in this, and I just like to. I think I perform well under pressure. I like to be on my toes, and I just like a new challenge every day. I don't like to get bored, and I think supply chain is something that offered me that, so it kept me going.
Can you share like any interesting story that you remember in terms of a new challenge that came to you in your job and you had to find a way to just figure it out?
I think there are way too many stories. Supply chain is so interesting. You will not imagine the kind of requests we would get from the business function. They want to launch a new product. They want to launch it in 7 days. Supply chain has to make it happen. And it's just not humanly possible to do it in 7 days. And then you have to figure out, you have to sit on a table, you have to see what options I have, how can I make it happen in 7 days? And you end up doing that in 7 days. I've launched an entire marketing campaign in 7 days. So this is just an example. So there are so many other examples. People will come up with ideas that they want to do something, which you will look at, which you look at them and you'll be like, this is not possible. But that's the fun of supply chain. You have to think about everything that you can do in order to make that possible. And in more cases, more often than not, you will be able to make it possible. And that's what is interesting about supply chain.
Yeah, this sounds really interesting. So, okay, so we know you're passionate about what you do, and we also know you're really passionate about representation of women, right? In your field. How many women were there, and how many women were there in supply chain in your team around you?
So unfortunately, supply chain is considered a very masculine field because historically speaking, it has actually been a very masculine field. Also because in supply chain, a lot of these manufacturing companies would come in. A lot of these manufacturing companies have a good supply chain program, right? So, which means they have a lot of different factories, and factories are usually either in remote areas or have these third-party labor workers, etc., who we have men dealing with. So traditionally, it has been a very, very masculine sector, very masculine culture. So you will hardly ever see women there, historically speaking. Recently, things have changed, and I was just looking at the numbers. There was a survey in 2015 by Frenetics. This is about the global supply chain because it's a problem across supply chain globally that we have less women in this sector. So globally, in 2015, a survey, Frenetics survey said there are 70 to 80% men in the entire supply chain workforce. And in the leadership roles, there are 95% men. And in 2021, we had a Gartner research survey, which said that about 40% of the workforce is now women. So we have really improved over the years. And in leadership roles, from about 5% or less than 5%, the number of women, percentage of women have now increased to 15%. So yes, globally, it's a problem. It's a problem that has been identified and acknowledged, and people are working on it, and we can see a positive trend over the years as well. However, in Pakistan, we are lagging far, far behind on this. I don't think I know anybody in a leadership role in supply chain in Pakistan. Um, there aren't many women in supply chain to begin with. There are global targets. Each of these companies have to have more gender diversity, especially in supply chain department, and we are performing extremely, extremely poorly on it. The rate of retention of women, female employees in supply chain is really bad. And there are problems around it. A lot of times we know what the problems are. Some companies, in some places, the problems, they're trying to address those issues. But unfortunately, I think we have a very long way to go, and there are a lot of things that need to change before we actually see the numbers improving in Pakistan.
Why is there such a poor retention of women in this sector in Pakistan?
There are many reasons. It really depends. So, I have worked in 3 different companies, and each of these companies had completely different cultures, completely different leadership styles, very, very different from each other. So, I think one of the main reasons why women would want to work in any company, irrespective of the department, is the culture of the company. So, that plays a very, very important role. There are companies, I have personally worked in a company which will take risks for women, which will give equal opportunities to women. But then while they believe in equality, they won't give equity to women. So it is a masculine sector. It is coming from that masculine culture, right? Women are expected to, in some way, masculinize themselves, for the lack of a better word, in order to be successful in that kind of culture. And you will see a few women actually becoming successful or growing in those companies, but then you will also see how they have completely changed themselves. So there are companies like that. On the other hand, there are companies which are mindful of this, which that are creating the right kind of changes in the culture, making the culture more accepting of women, etc., making the right kind of changes and all. But on the other hand, they're very scared when it comes to their female talent, and they're not willing to take those risks. They're very, very risk averse. They want to be 100% sure that the person is ready to take that kind of responsibility or take that kind of role that they're volunteering for. And only if they're 100% sure they'll be able to perform well in that role, they'll take that chance with them. That's not the case with men. They'll take risks with men. They'll let men fail. They'll give them other opportunities. That's not the case with women. So I think we have a long way to go on either side.
It's almost like we're repeating the same story, because when we started out with your personal story, and which is not just your story, it's a story of a lot of women like us, who are asked to just prove themselves on at every stage if they
Yeah.
choose to follow their dreams, right? So essentially, you're saying the same thing about women in supply chain as well. They're
Yeah.
expected to, take the entire burden and responsibility for all
Yeah.
their actions that are coming up without them knowing what is going to really be happening in the future,
Yeah.
while men don't have to take that burden at all and just yeah, it's just an unfortunate situation, and I honestly don't know how it's going to change. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, it will change perhaps one day, someday, but it will take a lot,
Yeah.
of
A lot of learning and unlearning
exactly
needs to,
unlearning as well.
yeah,
Yes.
happen.
Have you ever um, heard of stories around, say, workplace harassment or bullying or, any kind of those stories?
I think it's pretty common, especially in departments like supply chain. I think it has to do with our mindset as well. I don't know if it's a global masculine mindset or it's a Pakistani mindset, but generally, because I have interned in very masculine masculine culture-wise companies as well. So what I've seen across the board is that if you are a woman going into a masculine sector, you have to either show that you're tough enough, or they'll give you a very, very hard time, and you have to get through that. And that in itself will be a testament that that you can do it, or you are here and you deserve to be here, basically.
Yeah.
And in an attempt to give you that hard time, um, they'll sometimes, again, it depends on the culture of the company, sometimes they'll go to any lengths, including workplace harassment and bullying and all of those things. I've personally experienced that very early on in my career as well.
Is that something you'd like to talk about, or should we just move on?
Yes, I've experienced workplace harassment in the form of bullying. And the only thing that I would like to talk about with respect to that is that I wish at that point in time I had better people around me to give better advice, because I'm not very proud of myself when it comes to the kind of decisions I took as a result of, in response to the bullying. I wish I had reported it. I wish I had taken all the options that the company, at least on paper, the company was giving to me. But I listened to the advice of people who I don't consider to be my well wishers. And I wish there were, if not mentors or men, at least women who could have helped me out. So I hope that women, going forward, we are there for each other and we have this sense of sisterhood, and we give good advice or the right advice to each other, at least when we are going through something like this. Because the way I responded to bullying, the impact it had on me is very different from how it would impact other women. I have seen women come into supply chain, get bullied, get out of supply chain, and never ever look back. And these are passionate women who are coming, who want to have a career in supply chain. I ended up having an experience where I left the company, I left that environment, and that experience made me more confident about myself. Now I'm not going to take any such thing which would even come close to bullying or any sort of harassment, and I can take a stand for myself. But that's not the kind of impact an experience like a traumatic experience like workplace harassment or bullying can have on any girl. So I think I really hope that we can be there for each other in the future, and we can mindfully choose to be the kind of women we want to be in our careers.
That's correct. It's all the more reasons we need to share our stories, because I can imagine that a lot of us have gone through, some kind of bullying, some kind of harassment. And when we were going through that, possibly a lot of us didn't even have, women figures or just mentor figures who could help us navigate through that and make the right decisions to actually stand up for ourselves, right? Because if we are really talking about our culture as well, right? Um, we're told to be we're told to conform, right? We're told to be
Yeah,
quiet. We're so induced by fear that we're like, oh, I need to prove myself. Okay, if this is
yeah,
happening to me, let's just look in another direction and I'll prove myself there. It's about
yeah,
me. I'm going to prove something. So it's always questioning ourselves as opposed to how we are being treated and standing up for ourselves. And it's about time we teach girls who are coming up in any field, right? How to
Yeah,
just believe in themselves and have a little more confidence that what they're feeling is real and they
yeah,
need to step up for it, and what are the right tools that they require.
yeah,
Having said that, now you've moved out of Pakistan. Your work
yeah,
took you, continents away from Pakistan.
yeah.
How is that experience like?
Firstly, it's very recent for me to comment too much on it, but whatever I've experienced so far, I think I am thoroughly enjoying it. The kind of freedom that they give you in a place where the decisions are being made is very different from the kind of experience you have in Pakistan at an end market level. The kind of spend you are managing, the kind of innovation that's happening around you, the kind of impact you can create on the innovation that is happening around you, or the kind of ideas you can project, the way those ideas are going to be perceived is very different. Um, Overall, I just feel that I'm surrounded by only intelligent people. So that it in itself is a very exciting opportunity, right? When you don't have to explain yourself over and over again. Whatever you say, people will quickly understand it, intelligently respond to it, and you're constantly learning by everyone around yourself. I think that's a very interesting and very enjoyable experience.
Yeah. So tell me a bit about, you're in Luxembourg right now and you're working with Amazon, right?
Yeah.
How did you get to this opportunity?
So when I was in my grad school in the US, that's when because I was passionate about supply chain and I took a lot of supply chain courses. And today, Amazon is one of those companies which is the most innovative. And right now, basically, supply chain is going through evolution. And Amazon is at the forefront of that evolution. So anybody who is passionate about supply chain is has Amazon on their radar. We want if you want to be a contributor to that evolution that's happening right now, you want to be a part of
What is
Amazon.
that evolution like? What's happening?
So, for example, supply chain as we know it, especially in Pakistan or the traditional supply chain, I believe is going to be obsolete pretty soon. And along with it, the skill set that it brought with itself is also going to be obsolete pretty soon. Supply chain, the evolution that's happening right now is primarily happening because of technology, um, robots, e-commerce, data, big data, so data analytics, everything. So for example, traditionally, all the planning was done by humans on Excel files or paper. Planning is right now being done by data analysis teams. They are doing the trend analysis, data analysis, and forecasting. There are robots. So Amazon has a lot of smart warehouses where everything is being done by robots. There are a lot of videos available on YouTube for everyone to see. So there are a lot of other things that there are a lot of there's a lot of innovation that is coming in supply chain, and Amazon is at the forefront of that innovation. So anybody who's passionate about supply chain has Amazon on their radar for that reason. And I learned about Amazon and it's whatever it's doing when I was in the US. So of course I had it at the back of my mind, and I always wanted to work for Amazon at some point in my career. And when I learned about their expansion in Europe and opportunities, I applied and I got here.
It seems like it's all very exciting, but it is
Yeah.
a completely different kind of a, not just culture, but also the kind of, um, the way things are happening are very different where you
Yes.
are now from where you were in
Yes.
Pakistan, right?
Yes.
So again, I find you at this junction where it's a steep learning curve. Am I wrong in
Yes.
saying that?
No, you're not. So I think at any point in our lives, irrespective of what field you have, we are constantly learning and evolving. And for supply chain, this is a very exciting time to be in because it's undergoing an evolution phase. So either we evolve with it or we become obsolete. We're at that junction right now. So I'm really excited to be learning whatever is happening. I really want to diversify my experience, and I think I'm just at the right place at the right time. Luckily.
No, just don't call that luck. You've been working really hard and you've had a vision for yourself since the get-go. So no, Faryal, I don't agree with, that it's all luck there. Give yourself some credit, please. Give yourself some credit. So where to from here?
From here, I think right now I just want to diversify my experience and I want to learn and learn and learn more and more. So I think Amazon is offering me that. So I'm just very excited about that. Other than that, I'm also, because of coming here and looking at the kind of diversity we have here in the company and the culture of the company itself, I am learning the importance of diversity even more. I knew what it means and why it's important, but I'm learning more about it now that I'm here. And I'm also learning, the things that we take for granted in Pakistan, those things I can see here happening here, the impact it's creating, the culture, the Amazon, we say it's always day one as in a startup culture, because you have the freedom to make choices, you have to be very, very quick in getting things done. And the bigger an organization becomes, the more difficult and slower the processes become. So those companies we call the day two companies. So I've all my life worked for day two companies. So coming from a day two company to a day one company, I'm just thoroughly enjoying it. And everything that I'm seeing and the importance of diversity, whether it's gender diversity or any other form of diversity, the difference that everybody brings to the table in just a regular team catch-up meeting, I can see all of that and I can see the impact it's creating. So I feel I really am passionate about doing something along those lines in Pakistan or for Pakistan, if not in other areas, at least for gender diversity. So fingers crossed for that.
Fingers and toes crossed. Yes, we do need, a lot of this to be transported to Pakistan in one way or another, so that, our women there's so many girls back there like you, like me, from small towns, villages, big cities, but not having enough exposure or support system or mentors, right? Mm-hmm. Who are wanting to dream big. They just need a direction, right? And having said that, I just want that your family must be so proud of you. You must be so proud of yourself. And everyone who's going to hear your story is going to be so proud of your growth and the challenges you're putting yourself into and learning new things. So I'm just going to wish you all the best. And I'm going to thank you for taking out time today and doing this podcast with me.
Thank you, Safia. Thank you so much. It was really nice being here.
Really nice being with you here as well. All right. You have a great day ahead. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.